Everything you learned about Eden was the simplified version, not wrong simplified. There's a door most teaching never opens, and behind it is a cosmology so precise, it rewires creation itself. The church didn't hide this on purpose. Translation choices buried it. Tradition smoothed it down. And somewhere along the way, Eden became a children's story. It was always meant to be architectural. You've heard Eden described as a garden, green space, trees. Innocent humans, one forbidden fruit. That frame makes sense in a modern context, but it collapses the moment you step in. Step into the ancient Near Eastern world where the text was written. In that world, gardens meant something different. Buildings meant something different. Even the word priest meant something different than what you're carrying now. The gap between what was written and what you were taught isn't about conspiracy. It's about distance. Time creates distance, and when you cross that distance, Eden stops being a location. It becomes something far more serious. A temple, a cosmological axis, a seat of judicial authority. These aren't fringe ideas whispered in academic margins. They're the consistent findings of scholars who spend their careers in ancient texts, yet they rarely reach the pulpit. So let's walk through what the text actually says, not what tradition shaped it into. Not what feels comfortable to teach to a room full of people. What the text says. Secret 1. Eden was a temple, not a garden. The architecture is unmistakable if you know where to look. The tabernacle in Exodus has a specific structure: east-facing entrance, inner sanctum, outer court, cherubim standing guard. The layout isn't random. It mirrors something older. It mirrors Eden. Look at Genesis 2 with that frame in mind. God plants Eden in the east. Adam enters as a priest, enters a sanctuary. A most holy place exists within Eden, the center where the tree of life stands. Around it, concentric zones of sacred space radiate outward. Cherubim are stationed at the perimeter, not as gardeners, as guardians of threshold and holiness. This detail matters theologically because it means Adam wasn't a farmer. The Hebrew word for his role is abad, to serve, to minister, to work in sacred capacity. He was tending something holy, not harvesting something practical. When Genesis 3 describes the expulsion, it uses the same language Moses uses. Language. When priests are removed from temple service. It's not a story about exile from real estate. It's a story about removal from priesthood. Secret to the tree of life was still accessible after the fall. For a while, Genesis 3:22 contains a sentence most sermons skip entirely. God says, "Lest he take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever." Notice the tense, present tense. The tree is still there, still accessible, still functional. If God had destroyed the tree of life, that statement makes no sense. Why warn against something already gone? The expulsion wasn't a retaliatory removal of all blessing. It was a preventative action, a closure of access before Adam could compound the error. God was being merciful by restriction. He sealed the garden, not because Eden was destroyed, but because Eden's power was dangerous. Unguarded immortality in the hands of someone who just seized judicial autonomy. That would have been catastrophic. The tree of life would reappear later in Revelation. In the New Jerusalem, same tree, same location, cosmologically. Still alive, waiting. Secret 3, the 4 rivers, were a cosmological map, not a geographic one. Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, Euphrates. 2 are identifiable on an ancient map. 2 vanish the moment you try to locate them. Most readers assume this is a translation problem, an ancient geographical description we've lost. But that assumption breaks under pressure. The author of Genesis wasn't writing a travel guide. He was describing the axis of the cosmos, as ancient Hebrew cosmology understood it. In that world, Eden sat at the center, a cosmic hub where the waters of creation flowed outward. The rivers weren't just water. They were the distribution of blessing. The axis mundi, the world tree concept, found in cultures from Mesopotamia to Scandinavia to China. Eden wasn't a place you could walk to. It was the sacred center, the point from which reality emanates. The reason two rivers seem to vanish is because they exist on a different map entirely. A cosmological one drawn in theology rather than geography. This is why Eden's location has never been found. Archaeological teams searching ancient Mesopotamia for a garden with 4 rivers will fail forever. They're looking for a building on a map that was never drawn to scale. Secret 4 Adam was not alone in the world, just in the garden. Genesis 4 is the evidence no one adequately addresses. Cain murders Abel. God pronounces judgment. Cain's immediate fear, everyone who finds me will kill me. He's terrified of humans, other humans. Then he leaves, goes to the land of Nod, finds a wife, a civilization. No explanation, no origin story for these people. The text simply assumes they exist. This creates theological discomfort in modern Christianity. We teach that Adam and Eve were the first humans, period. But the Genesis text never says that. It says they were selected, called into a specific relationship with God, placed in the temple garden, given priestly responsibility. There were people outside Eden. Adam and Eve were chosen from among them, not created instead of them. This reading aligns with the language. Genesis doesn't describe humanity emerging at creation. It describes Adam and Eve entering covenant. The original audience understood this distinction. Modern Christianity flattened it into a single creation event. But the text holds a more complex truth. There were humans, then there were priests, then there was a fall from priesthood. Different categories, same world. Secret 5, the serpent had a name and a rank. In the divine council, Nahash, that's what the Hebrew calls the serpent. It's a loaded word, carries connotations of shining bronze divination. Not a descriptor of an animal, a title, a designation. Early Jewish sources, the Book of Enoch, rabbinic commentary texts. Modern Christianity often ignores, identify the Nachash as something far more organized than Satan in disguise. It was a created being, with standing, with rank, member of the divine council, the assembly where God made decisions about creation. The serpent's temptation in Genesis 3 reads differently when you understand this. It wasn't deception from outside the system, it was a challenge from inside it, a being with cosmic authority, testing the limits of human autonomy. What got cursed wasn't just an animal crawling on its belly. What got demoted was a member of the heavenly hierarchy. The curse stripped the Nachash of its shining aspect, its standing, its access to divine counsel. This is why the language of the curse is so specific. Dust you will eat isn't about dirt. In ancient Near Eastern ideology, eating dust is the sign of complete subjugation, removal from rank, eternal humiliation. The Nachash fell not as Satan, but as an opponent in a cosmic trial. Secret 6 Eden still exists, just inaccessible. The text never says God destroyed Eden. Read it carefully. Genesis 3:24. God places cherubim and a flaming sword to guard the way. Guard, present tense, active, ongoing, not a one-time expulsion, an eternal seal. The garden is still there, still standing, still alive, somewhere in the cosmology. Revelation 22 describes the tree of life reappearing in the New Jerusalem. Not a metaphor, not a replacement, the same tree. The text uses identical language, tree of life access, granted leaves for the healing of nations. If Eden had been destroyed, this wouldn't make sense. But if Eden was sealed, protected, preserved, waiting, everything aligns. God didn't destroy what he called good, he protected it, guarded it, made it untouchable until humanity was ready to approach it again. This changes the entire theological arc. The fall isn't about loss. It's about separation from access. It's about a priesthood removed from temple service, not a world destroyed. Secret 7, the fall, wasn't about fruit. It was about jurisdiction, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Most teaching frames it as a curiosity, humanity wanting information, wisdom, understanding. But that word know carries legal weight in ancient Hebrew. In judicial and royal contexts, to know good and evil is the specific phrase used for setting moral standards, the right to judge, to determine right from wrong. Judicial authority, sovereignty. What Adam and Eve seized wasn't information, it was jurisdiction, the right to be their own moral center. The sin wasn't disobedience rooted in curiosity. It was a coup, a claim of autonomous power. This is why the consequences are so severe, not because eating fruit is morally catastrophic, but because seizing divine prerogative is, because claiming the right to set your own moral standard means severing yourself from the standard setter. It means building a world where each person becomes their own god. The rest of human history is the outworking of that fracture. Cultures, philosophies, individuals, all building systems of meaning without reference to the source. That's the real fall. Not innocence lost to knowledge, priesthood lost to mutiny. So you carry pieces of this now. A temple hidden in a garden, trees still standing beyond access, cosmologies drawn in water and light, hierarchies of beings you never knew existed. A jurisdiction seized that reshaped everything. The Eden you were taught was simpler, but it was never what the text described. Now you know the difference. What you do with that matters.